Greetings, colleagues from around the world. I'm Barbara Dossey, International Co-Director of the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health, and I'm speaking to you today from my home office in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the USA.
And I'm Dr. Deva-Marie Beck, also International Co-Director of the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health, and I come to you from Ottawa in Canada. It's a pleasure to be with you to be introducing this Planetary Health virtual global conference for nurses and midwives, this innovative opportunity for nurses and midwives from across the world to be sharing their skills, their knowledge, their concern for planetary health issues. I'm remembering that Nightingale said that nursing is to change the conditions that preserve and restore health. And that's what these nurses from across the world are doing, nurses and midwives. Planetary health is an extension of what Nightingale envisioned for us.
Oh, Diva, when I look at how long we have been together, and let me say to colleagues out there, Diva and I are both Florence Nightingale scholars. And when we got together in the 90s and then coming into 2000, we wanted to find a way where we could focus on Florence Nightingale because we realized that history is one of the most important aspects of any profession. And so we created, with like-minded colleagues, the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health. We took the first four letters of Nightingale, NIGH, and that is the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health. So when we look at the legacy that we have, it is just extraordinary. And one of the things that is empowering about looking at history and reviewing is we're able to see the challenges that Nightingale had. And as we come in today, we are faced with the same things that she did. What we have that is different is that we have organizations, we have like-minded colleagues, we have a lot of scope and standards of practice, and we have protocols, and we now have the capacity with Zoom to connect and take the work further than we can imagine.
Indeed, indeed. Barbie, you're often sharing about how Nightingale combined her sense of spirituality and her sense of science. And clearly that's important for this conference.
And I think, speaking about that too, let me also say, because we reflect on that, is Nightingale's universal spirituality. She believed that it was important to acknowledge all world religions. In fact, she said that we put all of those different religions and their string in God's necklace. And as we were speaking about that too, her definition of God is a power greater than ourselves.
Uh, and she kept saying that we as nurses were responsible for helping nature, God, to look after people and to change the conditions, helping us to be healthy and to restore our health. That one of the things that I find very interesting about all of this, people will say, well, Nightingale was only a bedside nurse. No, she was she was actually in the 1870s, she was writing about deforestation in India was causing floods, and that the floods were causing runs of outbreaks of cholera. 1870, she was already an environmental activist using the media that she had in her time.
And Nightingale, she was an administrator, statistician, and that's one of the things that we certainly can focus on too, is looking at its science and also this universal spirituality. And it's not an either or. In our work, we combine these. I think it's also exciting, and I am always empowered by the fact that Nightingale called her work her must. And so that's what you and I have tried to do in our work with the Nightingale Initiative for Global Health, is it is our must to
Indeed.
focus on her legacy and help empower our colleagues around the world.
Yes, and I'm guessing that a number of these nurses, we've had actually 100 nurses and midwives speaking at this global virtual conference. I'm sure that they experience that sense of must, and perhaps everyone watching has that sense of nursing. Nursing isn't easy.
That's
Nursing is challenging, and if it's your must, it's what you bring to make the world better.
And I would say Nightingale's voice is on the internet if you've never heard it. And she says, when I'm no longer even a memory, just a name, I hope my voice perpetuates the great work of my life.
The other thing to say is that my favorite quote from Nightingale is that she said, health is not only to be well, but to use well every power we have. And I'm sure she would have been in awe of the power we have now with virtual global platforms. Health is not only to be well, but to use well our global virtual platforms.
Colleagues, we are so excited that you have joined us in this very important conference.
We send our best wishes for this conference to be outstanding in every way.
Excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, very happy to be with you at this International Council of Nurses. Thank you very much for inviting me, and greetings from Geneva at the World Health Organization. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss with you these famous 3 planetary crises. Since we are all health professionals, let's start with a good diagnosis. And this is the diagnosis. We are confronting 3 major risks for our human health. One, the climate change. And the climate change will bring us extreme weather events, high temperatures, their immediate health impacts in terms of heat waves or related illnesses and infectious diseases spread. And of course, it will bring as well the jeopardizing, the putting at risk our health systems. The second crisis we are facing, the pollution. Think about air, water, soil contamination, and of course, not only that, they will be responsible for respiratory, cardiovascular, reproductive, and even neurodevelopmental disorders. You know, to add that 7 million premature deaths are occurring every year due to the bad quality of the air we breathe. And then the third crisis, and all of them very much interlink, the biodiversity loss. We are disrupting our ecosystem, and this is leading us to a reduced food security. We have therefore new zoonosis, and of course, mental health stressors. In addition to that, let's continue with the diagnosis, and then I will stop with the negative part of this. The planetary boundaries are already exceeded. You know that we have a framework which identifies 9 processes that are very critical for maintaining the stability and the resilience of air system as a whole. And at the moment, all are heavily perturbed by human activities. Let me repeat it, by human activities. Isn't this lack of wise in our side? We have now breached 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, and those include climate change, the biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater use, and novel entities such as microplastics, endocrine disruptors, nuclear waste, and nuclear weapons. All of those thresholds underpin the stability on Earth that we need, and of which human health will depend heavily. The health and well-being impacts now, since we have the diagnosis, then let's look at how this specifically affects our health. And it's affected, of course, on our physical health. We will have increased incidence of heat stroke, vector-borne diseases, of course, malnutrition, as I mentioned before, air pollution calling all of these dramatic figures of 7 million premature deaths annually. We will have a very negative as well on mental health through eco-anxiety, massive displacement, grief over ecosystem loss. Vulnerable populations will be very much affected. And you know that children, older adults, and of course pregnant women, low-income countries and communities are the ones that are disproportionately affected. Let me give you an example. If we have deforestation, that will reduce the biodiversity. This reduction of biodiversity will promote zoonotic spillover, and this will increase the risk of a pandemic. Another example, very concrete, if we have an agricultural runoff, That will lead as the cause of water quality impacts, and therefore we will increase diarrheal diseases. Let's now work on something more positive and what is our role in our leadership and responsibility. And of course, you, the Nurse Council, what is your role? And I see many roles for you. Of course, on advocacy, we want you to champion the policies for clean air. Very recently, we have a very strong global conference on air pollution and health in Colombia. Many commitments were made, so we need your voice on clean air, on renewable energy, on sustainable food system. And this is just as well examples of what we are doing, for instance, on the implementation of air quality guidelines at the urban environment, working with mayors, making sure that parliaments as well are changing the air quality standards. I see another fundamental role for you that you are already playing on education. We want to integrate all of these issues around planetary health into your nursing curricula, and of course the continuing education. A well-equipped nursing profession, well-empowered and energized to safeguard both human and planetary health is fundamental. And of course, if you look at the recently developed WHO Air Pollution and Health Training Toolkit for health workers, you will find there something that I think is a very tangible, concrete, and specific example. We invite you to have a look at that. We need you as well on practical innovation. We need you on the development and implementation of low-carbon, resource-efficient health systems and care models. And I'm sure you heard about ATTACH, the platform on Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate Change and Health. This is a fantastic example where we are taking all the community of practice and reducing our carbon footprint as the health system. And we need you on engagement and mobilizing at local levels, communicate the risk, and build resilience. And now the final message, the call for action. Obviously, we would like to urge all nurses to see planetary health as an integral part to patient care and, of course, to public health. We would like to call you to collaborate across disciplines and sectors to drive this critical systemic change that we all need at the moment. And we need you as well, and this is my call of action to you, on reinforcing that protecting the planet is nothing else than a health imperative for now, for our current, but more importantly, for the future generations. So again, good luck with your Congress. Thank you for inviting me. We trust you 100%, and we have a lot of expectations on the role and the leadership you can play in this incredible challenge. Thank you very much.
Greetings. My name is Dr. Teddie Potter, and I'd like to welcome you to this conference. I'll be saying more a little later about my background, but right now I want to extend a very special thank you to Dr. Neira, who recorded that session as an introduction to our Planetary Health nursing webinar, or not webinar, but actually presentation in Helsinki, Finland last year at the International Council of Nursing. So if you heard her reference the council, that's what she's talking about. And she was very eager to give nurses the message that this is something that we're going to be really needed to be involved in, nurses and midwives. So again, welcome. Before we officially start our talks, it is essential for us to begin with Indigenous knowledge. Planetary health is not new. It's an ancient way of knowing. Ancient people and current Indigenous people understand that we cannot destroy the environment and still have a thriving and flourishing life, human life. So it is important for us to begin with a deep level of respect, humility, and celebration of Indigenous peoples all over the world. Fortunately, Stan Walker, an indigenous artist, Maori artist, has given us permission to play his song and his video as part of this conference. So sit back, take it in, listen. Perhaps even you've got your windows open, listen to the animals and the birds and the other members of our family as you listen to his words. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for allowing us to show this film and start this way, because it all starts with place. Wherever we are, whoever we are, it starts with the land, the water, the air that surround us. And so I'm Teddie Potter. I come to you from the land of the Dakota, the Anishinaabe and Ojibwe people in a land called Minnesota in the northern United States. I also am a relative of the Mississippi River, which is about a block away from me and fills my days with meaning and restoration. It is my pleasure to be with you today. We started this live webinar series, and it's, as far as I know, never been done before. And we'll leave it to nurses to think of a new way to do things. But we started with the Western Pacific this morning at 12:30 a.m. Minnesota time. And we've been going straight through. We've had 3 regions of the World Health Organization today, and we will have 3 more on Friday. If you miss them, don't worry because they're being recorded and your participation in this webinar allows you to have access to all the presentations for up to 3 months. So you can not fret or worry that you've missed something or, gee, I wish I had gotten better notes. You can go back and play those presentations. And now it's my great joy to introduce a dear friend of mine who happens to be her birthday today. And so now I'm happy that we can bring it all home. North America, let's wish Dr. Heidi Honegger Rogers a very happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, Teddie. And hi, everyone. Yeah, it's such an incredible opportunity to be here. I'm coming in from Santa Fe, New Mexico, the land of the Tewa people, the tail end of the Rocky Mountain chain in the high desert. And it's nice to have our friends and colleagues. We've been up and doing this for a very long time. I just started feeling a little punchy, so we'll see how it goes. But it is really incredible opportunity to be bringing together nurses from around the world and to be listening to the wisdom and the work that all of these incredible nurses and midwives are doing. So yeah, just glad you all are here. It's terrific to have you join us.
So some of you are very, very familiar with Planetary Health. You might even be the director of Centers of Planetary Health, teach Planetary Health yourself, or have been involved in this movement for over a decade when it first started. But if you just are joining today, you just heard about it, your friend corralled you and said, come on, let's listen to this webinar together. You are so welcome. It doesn't matter how long you've been here or how much knowledge you have. You are welcome in this great global circle of nurses and midwives trying to restore the future of the planet and restore human health at the same time. So sit back. I'm going to do a basic introduction of planetary health principles and concepts so we can all start on the same page. This photo was taken recently on April 2nd, so very recently by the NASA astronauts on the Artemis voyage. And isn't it lovely? That's our shared home. As I spoke to the people today in Japan and Australia and New Zealand, then again in Europe, all across Europe and Turkey and Russia, look at this. Isn't this beautiful? No borders, no boundaries, no visible conflict or fear or hatred. This is our home, our shared home. And we want to do everything we can to protect it and leave it in very good shape for the generations still to come. So if you take a look at this image, it shows the indigenous tribes and nations in North America. And all those little dots represent different tribal peoples. Indigenous peoples all over the world represent only 5% of the global population, yet they protect 80% of this planet's biodiversity. They are preserve and live in right relationship in order to sustain our planet's way of being and the beings that inhabit this planet. And so, with the deepest, deepest respect and really acknowledgement and humility, we recognize that planetary health is a very, very, very old way of knowing. It's just that some of us belong to cultures that in more recent centuries and decades have forgotten our interconnection. And we need to be moving back and we need to be learning from the people who have preserved the earth for so long. I show this map because the sort of peach color where I've got my star over there is the World Health Organization of North America. And so the United Nations calls this time that we're living in the triple planetary crisis. Know Your Colors is a special program where you can log in and put in your the location you live, and it shows you years back. Every year is represented by a different color to acknowledge the temperature, overall temperature of your place during that year. And I chose to pull up Canada. Look at the nice little ribbons of blue, occasionally a light orange. But look what's been happening in recent decades since the start of the burning of fossil fuels. Canada is in the red. And I can tell you that we know it because Canada's fires have had an impact on Minnesota. The air quality, even though our air is good and our forests are not burning, Canada's forest fires, the air follows the jet stream right over Minnesota. So we are all interconnected. Look at biodiversity loss across North America. Huge amount of biodiversity loss in the plains areas. And this is very, very concerning that we're losing our pollinators, the beings that are responsible for our food and nutrition. And then I pulled up as a symbol of the pollution in the triple crisis, planetary crisis, where PFAS and other forever chemicals are present in North America. Look at the East Coast and the Midwest. You can hardly see any land that is not already contaminated. And this has a big impact. This is the United Nations triple crisis, what they call the triple planetary crisis. Biodiversity loss, pollution of our air, soil, and water, and climate change. Climate change oftentimes is the only kid in town. It's the topic that people are aware of, concerned about, but they are not as familiar with the other crises that the United Nations says we have to be working on. And I'm here to tell you that the story is more serious than that. It isn't just a story of 3 crises. We've got multiple crises going on. And I oftentimes like to use the example of the human body. Our human body functions so well. It has multiple systems that all work in synchrony. Pulmonary system, cardiovascular system, renal system, endocrine system, etc., all working in harmony together. When one is weaker or is challenged, the others rise and strengthen or adapt or modify. And it just works very, very well until you get multiple systems starting to fail. And then you have multi-system failure. And any of you have worked in an intensive care unit or on emergency teams, you know when a certain number of those systems go down and are crashing all at the same time, it is very, very difficult to keep that person alive. It is the same thing for the planet. The planet is an organic, living, vibrant system with multiple interconnected systems that allow life on the planet to continue. Those systems need to be in balance. They need to be working together, and they cannot be start going down like our human systems that start to collapse. The scientists at the Stockholm Resilience Center and the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research have determined that there are actually 9 of these systems. So it's not just climate change, it's not just the triple crisis. 9 of these systems are in play. And if they are all exceeded, it will be very, very challenging for us to have life on this planet as we know it. The various systems include changes in biodiversity integrity. It is a normal process on this planet for some beings to come and go and become extinct. That just has happened since the dawn of time. But right now, we're living in the 6th mass extinction, where the extinction rate is 1,000 times normal. Now, just to get perspective, a previous mass extinction was when an asteroid hit the Earth and the dinosaurs died. This mass extinction is being caused by humans. We are doing this. We are the asteroid. We're the crisis that's happening. And we're causing massive extinctions and biodiversity loss. And sometimes I get a little ho-hum from nurses and midwives of, that, biodiversity isn't quite such a worry. It is. When our pollinators are threatened or disappear, we will lose our crops that require pollination. So it's very, very serious and something we have to have on our radar. Land system use. We are cutting down forests to create farmland. And it's oftentimes to create farmland in an area where the land is not that good to begin with. So more forests have to be cut down, and then more forests to be cut down. And then we're losing one of our major carbon sinks when we lose our forests. And so the land use is leading to, in many places, to deserts. Crops can no longer grow, and there's a lot of problems with that. Freshwater use. The Earth only has a certain number of water. It goes in these beautiful cycles of rain, rivers, ocean, evaporation, rain, rivers, ocean, evaporation. It's a lovely, lovely closed system. We are not getting extra water from anywhere. And so when we pollute or destroy our water, our drinking water in some way, that's water that we will never have back again to use. Biogeochemical flows. Nitrogen and phosphorus are naturally occurring elements on the planet, but because of our use of fertilizers and indiscriminate and heavy use, we're disrupting that natural process. Ocean acidification. Nurses will get this, and so will midwives. You cannot maintain life when our blood is too alkaline or too acidic. That goes back to those old acid-base courses or classes you had to take, and you probably rolled your eyes when you were a student. But it is essential to understand these narrow bands of life. Similarly, the ocean can't be too alkaline or too acidic. Otherwise, it cannot maintain life. That's ocean acidification. Aerosols in the atmosphere. That would be our air pollution. Ozone, stratospheric ozone. And I'll get back to those two in just a minute. Novel entities. Those are things that are abnormal. They're not naturally occurring on the planet. Things like plastics, like radiation products. Chemicals that we are producing, we're contaminating land, air, soil, and water with our novel entities or our chemicals we're making. And finally, climate change. As I said, you hear a lot about climate change, but we should be hearing about all of these. In September of 2025, we crossed the 7th boundary. 7 of the boundaries have been exceeded. 7 of 9. And that is happening very, very rapidly, that they're increasing in their being exceeded. And as I said, when they're all exceeded, it's very difficult to support life. But there's some good news here. Remember, I talked about aerosol loading and the stratosphere, ozone in the stratosphere. We've been able to reverse the process on this. There used to be a hole in the ozone layer, and it was getting more and more serious, worse, worse, worse. And the global community was able to get together, put their heads together, and figure out what was the cause and how do we reverse this. And they banned the chemicals that were creating this hole in the ozone. Similarly, with air pollution, they came up with very strong laws and modifications about the burning of fossil fuels and clean energy that have reversed this process and put us back in the safe zones on those two sectors. So it is absolutely possible to reverse this process, and that's where nurses and midwives come in. As I mentioned, look at all the things that are changing, all the things that we're disrupting, and all of these things have human health impacts. I show this slide because it's an indication of how serious this is. Global warming is measured in degrees of centigrade since the start of pre-industrial burning of fossil fuels. So we have increased, we keep increasing degrees of centigrade, global degrees of centigrade. And right now we're about 1.1, 1.2, 1.5. When we get to that level, many of the low-lying island nations, especially in the Western Pacific, will be gone underwater. That's whole groups of people having to relocate, having to leave their ancestral burial homes, their places that they grew up as a child, their fields, their ways of life, their sort of cultures. That is not acceptable. We have got to be working as a global community to ensure that all people have a place to continue to thrive. So all of these things are leading to human health issues. And you can see them right here: cardiovascular diseases, exacerbation of respiratory conditions, infectious zoonotic diseases, antimicrobial resistance because we're mismanaging antibiotics and other medications and disposal of those, toxin dioxin exposures, heat strokes, mental health effects, malnutrition, forced displacement and migration, civil strife and trauma. And each one of those could be a separate talk. But what I want you to understand is this is a nursing and midwife crisis. We have got to get involved. There is no separation of, well, the environment's over here and human health is here. And if I have time, I'll work on the environment. Or I do work on the environment, but what does it have to do with nursing and midwifery? They are hand in hand, and that's why we're here today. Excuse me. Long time of talking today. This is the sort of a schematic of the whole planetary health vision of how this works. So we can start at one end or we can start at another. I'll start at the health impacts end of the area. We are seeing nutritional diseases, infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, direct injuries, child and reproductive health challenges, and mental health challenges. This is where nurses generally work, the space we often work. But all of these, the seriousness and the level of impact of these diseases is determined or impacted by our social determinants, such as our governance model, our socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, our age, our gender. All of those factors, which we call social determinants of health or structural determinants of health, all of those affect the degree to which we will experience these disease processes. So if you start at the other end, all of these things are connected. They're all interconnected. So if we move far enough upstream, we come to the underlying drivers. What is driving this crisis? And what's driving this crisis is our modern culture, our values, our behaviors, our consumptive patterns, our narrative, what we tell ourselves about who we are and how important we are, our population size and demographic shifts and changes, and yes, technologies. Some technologies are beneficial and are changing lives and improving health, and some are very, very worrisome and contributing to further damage of the earth. These human causes are leading to changes in the 9 planetary boundaries. That's the environmental changes you see here, which end up having proximate causes of our diseases and illnesses. Lack of fresh water, food quantity and quality changes, toxic exposures that lead to these disease states and these changes in health. And it's all modified by social determinants of health. So where are nurses busy and where should we be busy? We definitely are involved in the disease and space at the far end here. But we also need to be involved in the modifying factors. If we can strengthen our societies, our communities, and increase resilience and decrease some of these threats and challenges, we will see people not suffer as much from the end disease state. But if we go way upstream, we are also being called to be involved in culture change, value change, and behavior change. Nurses are the most trusted profession year after year after year. For 24 years in a row, according to the Gallup poll, nurses are the #1 most trusted and most considered most ethical professions, not just health professions, but all professions, the most ethical and trusted profession. Therefore, when we work up front, way, way upstream on these behavior changes, these human behavior changes, people will listen and they will get involved and they will participate in shifting this narrative that has become so damaging. The modern planetary health movement got launched or started with the Rockefeller Foundation Lancet report on defending human health during the Anthropocene. And this is one of their statements. We've mortgaged the health of future generations to realize economic and developmental gains in the present. As you saw in that previous picture, consumption patterns and buying and purchasing and fast fashion and all the things where we're using and throwing away, accumulating, throw away, is a problem. And that's leading to all these planetary health challenges that we've mentioned. Phew, take a deep breath. Sometimes I hear people speak and they say, oh, I never talk about the root causes of climate change or what's happening. We'll just talk about the solutions. But I am a nurse and I have learned that that does not work. Because you don't say to somebody who has a brand new diagnosis of cancer, okay, let's just start working on your diet and your exercise and we'll manage your pain. You help them understand what cancer is. What is happening to their body? What will help their body be stronger? What actually puts their body in a worse place to deal with the underlying cancer? People need to know what they're facing. And it is the exact same thing with these challenges in the earth. We need to know what's happening. So it's a good approach to help people recognize that this is an urgent moment, that this is a time that we have to get busy. We can't get busy decades from now addressing these problems. We need to get busy now. So I like to use this image to explain planetary health. All of you, as nurses and midwives, are well aware of public health. Eco-health is a prioritization of the environment and the health of the environment. One Health looks at medicine, human medicine, and veterinary medicine, and where do those intersect, and how do you prevent or treat zoonotic diseases, and are you mindful of the human-animal intersection, with a little bit of the environment thrown in. Global health is human health at the global scale, and certainly the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. All of them have a human component. All of those have a animal and plant and land component, but they all vary in degrees and amount. And for the most part, they all work in separate silos. What we're inviting you to do is to come into the planetary health movement. That doesn't mean that you stop being a public health nurse or stop your involvement as a midwife who supports global health. It means that you come together with all of these people, all of these groups working on behalf of restoring health. And planetary health is the big enough tent, if you want to use that metaphor, or the big enough buffet table that there's room and space for everyone. And I mean everyone. It is not just health professionals. It is everyone is needed, all hands on deck. So in 2015, as I said, that launched the modern planetary health movement. But again, planetary health is deeply, deeply connected and embedded into the belief systems, knowledge systems, and ways of being of Indigenous people all over the planet, both in the past and Indigenous peoples today. And so we are learning from, with Indigenous leaders and teachers who are helping us set our feet back on a sustainable path. At about the same time of 2015 or shortly afterwards, the Planetary Health Alliance was born. And the Alliance grew from a handful of people and organizations to now it includes over 500 organizations, many, many individuals in 80 different nations, over 80 different nations. And this is how the Planetary Health Alliance defines planetary health and the definition that we are trying to use globally. Planetary health is a solutions-oriented, transdisciplinary field and social movement focused on analyzing and addressing the impacts of human disruptions to Earth's natural systems on human health and all life on Earth. I'd like to call out a few things about this definition. Planetary health is solutions-oriented. I was a climate activist for over 2 decades. I marched, I walked, I wrote, I taught, and I just did everything to stop climate change in its path. But I began to realize that it wasn't just climate change, it was all of those issues. And I had to change my tactics or we were never going to get ahead. And I wanted to focus on this, solutions oriented. I already knew the problems and I knew the science behind the problems, but now I wanted to know the science behind the solutions and how do we mobilize and get the solutions amplified and scaled to the level that we need. Planetary health is a transdisciplinary field. That means that it is not just interprofessional or interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, it is transdisciplinary. And I'll be talking about that further in just a minute. But again, I cannot emphasize that it is for everyone. No one is unimportant. No one has a skill that is not necessary. So we will find a way to use your skills if you come and join the movement. And that brings us to the fact that it is a social movement. It's not just a knowledge, it's not just a science, it's not just a field of research. Planetary health is a movement of change. How do we change and analyze and address these human causes to disruptions to Earth systems? And this is one of my favorite parts. It isn't just about humans. It is about all life and all elements on the planet. So it's about the entire system. So this is the picture I use for transdisciplinarity to help us understand it. If we use the metaphor of having a bucket of red paint, a bucket of blue paint, and a bucket of yellow paint, if you bring those paints together under the right circumstances, something happens and something new becomes possible. It's no longer just red and yellow, orange becomes possible. Not just blue and yellow, green becomes possible. Not just red and blue, purple becomes possible. That is the type of relationship we're trying to create. That it's not just about having a nurse and a farmer and an engineer all in the same room. We want to have us talking, leaning in, listening deeply to each other so we can create new solutions that will return and restore the health of the entire planetary system. So how do you do that? Because we're so used to having a disciplinary language. Midwifery has its own language, nursing has its own language, agriculture has a language, engineering, law, you name it, every discipline has a language. And we would be running around nodding at each other and knowing we had to work together, but we didn't have a shared language. So in about 2020, we decided we needed a shared language for the planetary health movement. And we brought together 24 experts from different fields from around the world, and we said to them, okay, folks, what do your students in higher education need to know in order to become knowledgeable practitioners of planetary health? And people worked and they submitted their responses, and there were over 500 suggestions of things we should include in our curriculum. Well, that is not going to work. Most faculty say, we don't have room to teach one more thing, let alone 500 things. So I used the metaphor with this team of 24 experts. I used the metaphor of the winnowing basket, where you just throw rice up in the air and you let the chaff or the hulls, the wind blow that away, and soon you have the things that really matter caught in your basket. So I challenged all 24 experts to winnow. Just keep winnowing until we have the essence in our baskets. And this is what we could all 24 fields could agree on that we needed. And it became our planetary health education framework. 5 core domains. No matter where I go in the world, no matter what discipline I speak to, no matter what demographic I have a discussion with, we all share this common language of 5 core domains. The first is interconnection within nature. This is really important, and listen to how I'm saying this. It's not it's not reconnection with nature. It's reminding us, as the indigenous people all over the world knew, we are not separate from nature. Humans are part of nature. What you do to humans, you do to nature. What you do to nature, you do to humans. We are nature. We're absolutely part of the system. So we don't have to work hard to reconnect people. We were never disconnected to begin with. And that disconnection is the false story or false narrative that started us on a very, very dangerous path. Some cultures, some messengers said, oh, no, humans are separate from nature. And as a matter of fact, we're much better than nature. We're more important than nature. And what we need is what's primary. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of nature because it's just a thing. It just doesn't matter. It's not alive. It doesn't, only humans are important. And that attitude is purposeful. That attitude was adopted so that we could take, use, consume. We could blow off the tops of mountains, cut down all the forests, use as much water as we wanted, and indiscriminately mine and take elements without any consideration of the impact on all the rest of nature or on future generations. So that has got to be healed. We have to recognize we are nature. That's at the core of this planetary health education framework. Once we have that down, we need to understand the Anthropocene in health. These problems that I have discussed are human caused. Humans are the cause. It is not some natural cycle or pattern or we'll come back around. We've always seen these things. No, what we're seeing now are the direct results of human activity. So human behaviors are changing human behaviors are the solution. And everyone needs to understand that. Equity and social justice. Remember, I showed you those modifying factors. And so many of the people that have caused very few of these problems or contribute a very small bit to these problems are suffering the worst impacts and the first impacts. And so equity and social justice cannot be sidelined. It's not something just nice that if we have time, we'll teach about it or we'll adapt it, or that we don't want you mentioning these words. You can't teach or adopt planetary health without an environmental justice orientation. everyone has got to partake in shifting the system, participating in shifting the system, and in a system that will work to preserve their health and ensure that they can flourish. Systems thinking and complexity. Um, our modern way of studying and science oftentimes teaches us and tells us we have to reduce down to the tiniest little piece that can be studied. And what we're trying to say is, yes, that's very important. Knowledge is sometimes done by reduction, but we also need to move out, and connect and help people understand systems, thinking, and complexity. The problem when you get too narrow is you think you've come up with a solution and, oh, doesn't this look great? And you put it in place and it has terrible consequences for the rest of the system. So all people need to understand we're a part of one major system. Shifts and changes need to be considered carefully. We need to protect ourselves from unintended consequences by really looking at the complexity of the situation. There are no quick fixes. Anybody who tries to sell you a quick fix to biodiversity loss or pollution is just not being honest. It's extremely complex, very challenging and difficult, and it requires all of us to address. And finally, the fifth domain in planetary health is movement building and systems change. We are calling everyone to apply their knowledge and skills in a great and grand movement to create systems change. So once we had a shared language, then we said, okay, well, now we can all talk together, but where are we going? We need a shared vision. And that shared vision came about in 2021 when the Planetary Health annual meeting, which was scheduled to be in Sao Paulo, became a virtual annual meeting because of COVID. So we crowdsourced the global planetary health community asking them, what should our shared vision be? And out of that came the Sao Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health. We need a fundamental shift in how we live on Earth, what we're calling the Great Transition. And achieving the Great Transition will require rapid and deep structural changes across most dimensions of human activity. That doesn't mean we just change one little part and then go about our business in all the other parts. It means everything needs to shift and change. And that, instead of being, a worrisome or we're wringing our hands, isn't that terrible? It's a great invitation to innovate and to create a better future for everyone. And the Sao Paulo Declaration goes on and offers blueprints for various sectors. So there's one for researchers, there's one for artists and poets, faith leaders, city planners, and this is what the global community, so I want to stress that, the global community's vision for where we're headed in the health sector. And this is our blueprint for activity as far as nurses and midwives go. We're to reorient all aspects of our systems towards planetary health, from our purchasing and use of supplies, energy sources, our efficiency, and our waste reduction. We're to commit to being achieve nature positive carbon neutrality by 2040. We've got a lot of work to do. And moving from an illness care systems to health preservation systems, being involved in disease prevention and health promotion, and to make sure that health equity is at the heart of this transition. We need to incorporate other ways of knowing and perspectives besides traditional Western medicine, including the knowledge, and knowledge is led by Indigenous people, not just taken from Indigenous people, but led by Indigenous people, as well as other integrative practices. We need to be mindful that communities have to be redesigned so we have active transportation, access to green space, nutritious diets, good food for everyone, and we advocate for health as a basic human right. Isn't that lovely? That is what we're aiming for. That's what we're not just hoping for, but that's where we're moving. The final document I want to call your attention to was a product out of many people worked on this, and it was presented at the Planetary Health Annual Meeting in 2024 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and that is the Planetary Health Roadmap and Action Plan. So if we now have a shared language, we have a shared vision of where we're going, we now need a shared strategy. And what areas are common all over the world? That's governance, education, and business. How do we set a global strategy to start to modify those areas? And how do we communicate those changes effectively in order to create transformative change? That is the Planetary Health Roadmap and Action Plan. I want to call you to your attention to the Planetary Health Alliance, and I know that Hannah is going to be involved in several presentations and helping us understand even further how to get connected. So I'll briefly talk about the Planetary Health Alliance. I love the Alliance. The people I've met across the board in all nations, all fields, all sectors are there because they share the common vision and want to create this better future. There's tons and tons and tons of resources available, all open access, all things that you can link in and use, from classroom talks, PowerPoints, videos, syllabi, course designs, to the latest research, to regional hubs. And I don't want to spill the beans if Hannah's going to be addressing these, but I wanted to call your attention to our commitment to a global understanding of planetary health and bringing the globe to work. And this is one of our most recent initiatives, as we did these 3 videos. One is what around the world, what were stories of people awakening to this interconnection within nature? What are stories of the personal experiences of environmental degradation? And what are stories of things that they've tried and succeeded at? So this QR code leads you right to the Planetary Health Alliance. I really hope you join us. It's free. There's no, you don't have to pay a fee, and it's a wonderful way to get connected to the entire global network of people doing this work and working on behalf of now and current and vulnerable people and current and future generations. So I close with this image, and this image was taken on April 6th by, again, the Artemis crew as they came around the dark side of the moon and they saw our home once again. And Christina Koch, the Artemis astronaut, said, "We will always choose Earth and we'll always choose each other." I'm going to say that again because that is so moving. We will always choose Earth and we will always choose each other. And that's what we're calling you to do today. That's what this whole webinar is about. Coming together as the global community of nurses and midwives to choose Earth and choose each other. The resources I have used for this talk are all available at the Planetary Health Alliance, so I hope you will join us and start to use them in your own practice. Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Rogers.
All right. Hi, everyone. Teddie, as always, it's just so lovely to listen to you. I just, I could listen to you all day long. So thank you so much for introducing us to Planetary Health and the work that we have ahead. I'm here to really enter into conversation around what does it look like when we're using planetary health as a lens through which we move in every nook and cranny of nursing. So we'll be talking about that, nursing for planetary health and well-being. And to go with theme, I also had a picture of Earth taken just a few weeks ago, and I love this image, and I kept it in here knowing Teddie had it in her slides, just to take a minute to really sit in and sink into this idea that this is our home collectively. We've had the opportunity to connect with folks in Asia, the Pacific, and Europe this morning, and now here in North America. And it's, just look at that beautiful picture of our home that we share together and the home that we share together as nurses and midwives. Anyway, just centering on that. So nurses are really the bedrock of our healthcare systems. These are facts that I love saying every time I'm giving a talk. We have about 29 million nurses globally. There are 2.2 million midwives globally. Yes, we need more. We need more nurses and midwives. And I know we're all working to love and mentor caring and compassionate beings into our profession as we speak. But that is a lot of nurses and midwives that are out in the world doing incredible work. We comprise almost 50% of our global health workforce. And so, we deliver the majority of primary healthcare services worldwide. And we truly are able as nurses to do an incredible amount of work together. We're also uniquely connected through all of our nursing organizations and the International Council of Nurses as nurses and midwives. And that gives us an advantage to be visionaries around planetary health and how we're going to move through this very complex time. So nurses and midwives are doing, all sorts of work around the world. This is just a kind of a global summary of what we're working in. We're advancing public and population health through disease prevention, through promotion of maternal and child health, through community education on nutrition and sanitation, through chronic disease management, prevention, screening. We're also working a lot in emergency response, and I just want to hold a moment to talk about how we are we were really the backbone of the pandemic responses, both 100 years ago and 100 plus years ago in 1918, and then during the COVID-19 pandemic, almost 101 years later. Nurses are also really the bridges to work in health equity. We are bridging gaps in rural and underserved, and also just to recognize we're also doing this work in conflict-afflicted populations and areas. And we had an opportunity to have some nurses that are really truly on the front lines in their everyday lives right now, joining us this morning much earlier. So we are out there doing incredible work. When we were planning this global conference with Deva-Marie Beck and Dr. Barbie Dossey, Barbie's who's here today listening, Deva said something in one of our meetings: nurses and midwives, we are on the vanguard of what humanity can and must become. And I thought, I have got to make that into a slide. I love that idea of us as models for how we're moving forward. She deepened that in an email to me. Across the world, nurses are exemplary for caring, compassion, commitment, courage, the attributes that humanity needs. We have demonstrated these with sick nursing, and now we can demonstrate them with health nursing. The power of our public voices can be heard, listened to, and respected for the value of our perspectives as role models for the health of humanity. And I will say I've read this now 3 times today, and I get teary every time I read it. But these, this is the vision, right? This is why we're here, and what we're talking about today, and what what our later sessions are really going to be deeply exploring. So the two loops model is something that I put in my talks since I was introduced to this a couple of years ago. It helps me think about what's the work that we're doing, where are we in time, what are we witnessing, and what are our responsibilities. So the two-loop model is based in nature's natural cycles. It comes out of the Berkana Institute. I've put a lot of resources together in a Google document for you all that include the resources on the two-loop model. But let me just explain kind of how I start explaining this to the next generation of nurses, the nursing students that are in my care, and also to my kids, my nieces and nephews, their friends. So where we are sitting is we are in both the top arc and we are in the bottom arc. So as the dominant systems have already peaked and are starting to unravel and move into compost, the emerging systems are being imagined and co-created and are moving into being. We are sitting in two places, so we're really in three. So if you look at hospice, compost, connection, this is where we are in time right now. We're seeing day to day the problems that our earth is facing, that our populations are facing, that our patients and their families are facing. We're witnessing systems that are not in service to the flourishing that we all need and deserve as human beings and as nature beings. We are helping to soften the blow of unraveling and unjust systems. We do that every day when we show up to the work that we're doing in nursing and in midwifery. We are helping to recognize when systems need to unravel. We are helping that compost, and we are starting to think about and connect with the ideas that we need to build emerging systems going forward. So I could talk about the two loops model for days, and I really actually think it's an excellent tool to think about who we are, where we're going, what our responsibilities are in nursing. But for now, just kind of knowing that we're in both loops, that this isn't the time of like doom and destruction, and that it's just all, I guess for lack of a better thing, going to hell in a handbasket. It's like we're seeing a lot of pain, we're seeing a lot of problems, but at the same time, we need to pay attention to, we are co-creating some of the most amazing, innovative, loving, compassionate connections. And we are as nurses really finding the innovations, the ideas, the illuminations to carry us forward toward a more flourishing and just future for both us and nature. So the Great Transition was called for in the Sao Paulo Declaration, and the term the Great Transition is something that Joanna Macy and many thought leaders talk about. The Great Transition is this place that we are trying to get to at this point, and it's calling us in to think about how we are living differently, how we need to live differently together, which is around how we construct our cities and construct and live in our cities, how we design our healthcare systems and our sensibilities for health, how we produce and consume food and manufacture products, and how we think about energy, how we manage and work in reciprocal relationship with our landscapes and the resources that we have here together on Earth. how we create movements and policy shifts around planetary health, and then very importantly, the stories that we tell ourselves about our place in the world, our relationship to nature, a lot of what Teddie was talking about when she started. So nurses and midwives are doing a lot of very similar work, if you catch it, around the world, right? We're working in clinical practice, we're working in community and population health, we're working a lot in crisis and humanitarian response, and we need to, again, we need to pay attention to that work. That's work that we are uniquely set up to be doing right now. And then we are working in leadership and advocacy in a myriad of ways as we are moving together as nurses and midwives. When we are thinking about our practice, we are working together on what are the determinants of health, right? What is influencing the health and well-being of ourselves, our families, our patients, their families, our communities. We are used to, as nurses, thinking about these nested determinants. We work a lot, particularly here in North America, as many of you are familiar. We work a lot in the individual determinants of health domain. We spend a lot of our time talking to people about how to improve their lifestyle so that they can be as healthy as possible. But we're also starting to work in the cellular, cellular determinants of health, how our microbiome is impacting our health, certainly our genetics, also our epigenetics, and a new area, new-ish. It's really not all that new, but the newer area of cellular determinants of health, which is around the exposures that we have. So the exposome is what that's called, and what the environmental exposures we have and how that determines our health. As nurses and midwives, we're working, consistently in the social determinants of health, so the microsystems and the mesosystems, where we understand those very deeply. We're working in the structural determinants of health and how our infrastructure, our policies, our systems, our geopolitical landscapes, our governance, how that impacts our health. We're working in our, working in understanding our macro systems, these bigger, broader areas that determine our health, which is around our laws and our structures, our cultures, our values, the narratives and stories we tell ourselves of who we are and how we fit in together. And planetary health is adding the chronosystems level, right? So, so that's sort of where we're sitting when we're talking about planetary health. Is it's not just about planetary health, but it's about incorporating planetary health into how we think about and move with all of the determinants of health. And so these chronosystem layers, climate change, global pollution, biodiversity loss, and how those are impacting our health and well-being as well. The Planetary Health Alliance gives us this beautiful image, which I know we all, or many of us, teach from, that really does talk about how does planetary health work? Teddie went through that quite a bit. And how does that impact health and well-being, and what's the narrative that we're talking about when we're talking about planetary health? And just to re-give you the image of the planetary health framework, and Teddie starred where we're working in nursing, right? We're working in the health impacts and reducing the health impacts as best we can, managing, being prepared for those, so that people have less adverse impacts from all of these environmental and earth system changes. We're working in modifying factors. We do that every single day. And very importantly, we really are working in this narrative of underlying drivers and how we start to talk about our collective behaviors as humans, our assumptions that we've made, and how we need to renegotiate those as we're moving forward. So in our practice, the first thing, nuts and bolts, what's the first thing that we need to be doing as nurses and midwives out in the world? We need to improve our environmental health literacy. We need to look around. I guess this is the moment where I will remind you, the word planetary health seems really big, right? It feels vast, but planetary health is actually very deeply applied locally. So when we are moving with nursing for planetary health and well-being, we're thinking about planetary health in our community, in our local area. So when we are improving or working on our environmental health literacy, which is step one, we just need to look around. What are our local sources of pollution? What is our local context for climate change? What are our local, what are the local challenges that we have around water and nutrition and so that's recognizing what is impacting us here locally, and then understanding what those health harms are that are associated with those exposures. And then we need to work on educating to reduce those health harms and advocating for mitigation to reduce exposures to the things that are harming our health. So environmental health literacy is just step one of our practice. And it's something that we're all responsible for. And I know from conversations we've been having all day, everyone really, really deeply gets. I wanted to, I have this slide about practice, like where are we thinking about, the work that we need to be doing a little bit more of as we are moving in our practice. We need to be thinking about our role as nurses and midwives as seeing patterns, noticing what's coming, noticing what's impacting our health and well-being. So, and then developing early warning signs, alerting people to what's happening, narrating what the stories are, and trying to start to help people build out resilience to some of the things that we know are really starting to impact our health in our own communities. We do work, and we need to continue to think about our work in the context of infrastructure, making sure that our healthcare systems that we have, or the healthcare systems that we are building, are prepared to help to deliver the healthcare that we need going forward in the future. We need to attend to mental health, our mental health first, and then the mental health of the communities that we're working with, people who are experiencing existential dread, eco-anxiety, climate grief, certainly in our communities that have loss of lands and livelihoods and are being displaced as well. And then we need to be thinking about the work that we're doing to build up and strengthen community networks, how we extend out the healthcare services, train local responders, and support our vulnerable neighbors. Nurses and midwives are already advocating for healthy food and diets that improve our health. It turns out the diets that are good for us are actually also good for the planet. We need to be thinking about our food systems in each of our communities and how we can grow and support as much regional, local food that's resistant and resilient. Regenerative agriculture is one big key component of that. We know that a lot of the agriculture practices that we have worldwide are actually very damaging to our land and water supplies over time, and our pollinators, and so we need to be reimagining how we are talking about the health of our food systems, and then how we can strengthen high nutrition diets in our communities. through, it's just stuff we have to pay attention to, and that frankly, I know many of us here in this room are working in. We're also called in to be thinking about, very specifically air pollution is common in most of our communities. And we need to understand what is the air pollution in our communities. How do we know the levels of air pollution? How do we help our patients and our communities reduce their exposures to air pollution that causes, all sorts of disease? And how we do the same thing for heat exposures as we have more and more extreme heat days in communities that have never experienced those. We need to be thinking about that. We also need to be thinking about and looking around for what's shifting in terms of vector surveillance, in terms of infectious disease spread from shifting patterns in animals and our, and insects. Water safety is something else that we need to be paying attention to. And then, as always, there's a component of equity care that we need to be working with. So that was practice, right? What are the things that we need to be adding or integrating into the nursing and midwifery practices that we already have? And this is education. So Teddie told the story of the development of the Planetary Health Education Framework. And I'm going through it here to give you an idea of a little bit deeper idea of like how we can integrate that into our work that we're doing. Many of us are educators in nursing schools and midwifery schools, but all of us are educators of our patients and our communities, and we're certainly educators and mentors of the next generation of nurses and nurse leaders. So the Planetary Health Education Framework, when you read it, and we've got the link to the full framework in our resources at the end. Each section has key concepts and then describes what the key concepts are. The interconnection within nature is really that centered idea that our health and well-being is intertwined with the health and well-being of all of our ecosystems, that we as humans are not separate from, but integral to and in nature. And I think you're probably all, I'm imagining all of you going, yes, exactly. Our health is intertwined, right? We are nature. And when I talk to the next generation of nurses, our nursing students about this, they get it. I think we all sort of, really deeply, viscerally understand this. But we need to recognize, particularly here in North America, that our healthcare systems are not actually in service to this truth. Our healthcare systems are not paying attention to this idea of how intertwined our healthcare is, or our health is. And so that's some of the work that I'm finding for myself, that I need to hold this idea as I'm moving forward, to think about how am I narrating what I'm teaching in the College of Nursing? How are we thinking about the design of our healthcare systems and the sensibilities for health and well-being that we're talking about with our communities? So that's kind of that section. And then we need to understand and teach about these larger social ecological determinants of health, this idea of how globalization works and dynamics, how epidemiology works, how the damage that we're doing to the earth in these larger, climate change areas and global pollution, the chemicals that we're putting out into the world, and how that all interacts. I think we're getting more and more an understanding of how globally connected we are. And these are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about and teaching in nursing and midwifery. Equity and social justice is something I feel like is core to the work that we're already doing. So just to remind us all that as a health profession and as a profession globally, our whole being in nursing and midwifery is around equity, access, thinking about what's fair, what's just, how are we going to get the right services to everyone, those kinds of things. Equity and social justice in planetary health adds two new layers. They were new to me when I started working in this. The idea of multi-generational justice. So thinking about going forward, what are the next generations of humans that are yet to come? What is fair for them? And then multi-species justice. What is fair and equitable for all of nature? So just a invitation to add those layers into the work that I know we're all doing. Systems thinking and complexity is the other thing that I think we all get and understand in nursing. The invitation here is to really think about how do we practice this every day? How do we embody deep listening, looking at things from various points of view? The idea of co-creating, I think as nurses and midwives, we're really good at looking at a problem and figuring out a solution. But when we're talking about this scale of problem, we need as many people in the room as we can get. We need to be working together to really create good solutions, right? As we're moving forward. And systems thinking and complexity is something that we need to really be playing with and moving with as we are, thinking about, as we're working in education and, working with our communities. The final component of the planetary health education framework is something that I really love. It's this idea of movement building and systems change, because planetary health isn't just about understanding what's happening and then responding to it. It's actually about shifting the way we are living together, shifting our sensibilities, shifting our systems to do better, to be more equitable and fair, to be more inclusive, and to really procure collective flourishing, just everyone doing okay here on Earth for now and in future generations, us and nature. So I love that part of it, because it gives us an idea of where are we going with this, and what does it need to look like. So I started with practice, I went through education, and this is advocacy. Some of the work that we are doing together as nurses and midwives, and just to remind us, these are roles that we play out in the world. We are trusted professionals, right? This is true definitely here in North America. It is very true around the world. When we talk about the things that we care about. We speak from our heart, we speak from our experience, and people listen to us. So advocacy and policy is something that we're all moving in. It looks differently for all of us. Some of us are very comfortable speaking to legislative bodies. I personally break into sweat and tears when I do that. So it's not my place of comfort. But we're all good at sharing what we care about, communicating and educating the people that need information, and then thinking about what are ways of doing things a little bit better. So advocacy and policy looks differently for each of us, but it is one of the main roles that we have. We've always known that in nursing. We've always said, well, we're patient advocates, but we're actually community health advocates. We're planetary health advocates as well. I think here in North America, everyone knows about the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, but I want to call in our amazing colleagues who've organized Annie, the resources, the podcasts, the videos, the fellowships that they have, the advocacy and policy work that they're doing is inspiring, it's educational. There are multiple toolkits and things that we can share, we can look through ourselves and share with people. So just to remind you that in our advocacy and policy work, the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments is really helping us show up easily into those spaces. So if you have not yet signed up or joined, and there are various levels of being able to, of joining and working with Annie, please do. So in addition to practice and education and advocacy, we're also moving collectively in research and scholarship in nursing and midwifery. I've made a couple of slides about some of the priorities that we have right now, the work that we could be doing, that we need to be doing a little bit more of, work that we are already doing in research and scholarship. In climate change, we need to continue to notice and document the health impacts of things that our communities are experiencing: heat, flooding, drought. We need to focus on maternal and neonatal outcomes very specifically in that. We need to be doing research on this expansion of vector-borne and zoonotic diseases and how we are responding in nursing and midwifery. We need to be thinking about climate-driven displacement, the effects on continuity of care for vulnerable populations who are displaced because of flooding, fire, hurricanes, all of the things, conflict, drought, those kinds of things. We do need to continue to be doing some research around eco-anxiety and psychological resilience as well, and how we work with populations that are experiencing not just, kind of existential dread around what's happening environmentally, but very specifically with indigenous populations, with populations who are experiencing land loss of livelihoods. So those are all areas to, hopefully sparking some ideas for future researchers. In global pollution, we need to be working on, paying attention to the air pollution that we're being exposed to, how that is impacting our diseases. What does it look like on high air pollution days and ER visits? What does it look like, exposures and adverse health impacts, particularly in some of our more vulnerable populations, kids, babies, pregnant people, the elderly, people who are on the front line of environmental pollution areas, so fence line communities. We need to be thinking about water contamination and how that's impacting our health, and particularly our maternal and child health, our fetal development. Chemical exposures, I think we're all becoming way more aware of endocrine disruptors and heavy metals and microplastics. I know here in New Mexico, we are paying a lot of attention to that. It's overwhelming, but it's also an area that we really need to be continuing to study and understand so that we can really narrate what the health impacts are and how we are going to not only reduce health harms, but mitigate exposures, reduce the exposures to these kinds of materials, and then occupational exposure risks as well. So what's happening to us in our own professions. And then doing research and scholarship around biodiversity loss and what this needs to look like as well. So here is the, I've done the spider web as the theme for research and scholarship. These are some of the cross-cutting research priorities that we have. I think sustainable healthcare models are really important to be studying and working in. Those are actually just ripe for DNP projects. So as if anyone's moving with DNP students, I feel like there's so many great resources to help to decrease the waste and the pollution that our healthcare systems produce. Other research areas that we really need to be thinking about and focusing on is how do we work in partnership with Indigenous and community-led knowledge systems? How do we integrate those in? How do we work with this kind of wisdom in a way that gives this wisdom the attention that is long overdue, and how do we use that as research methodology? So I know a couple of people are from my home university at the University of New Mexico. Our population health college is really specializing in this. And there are a lot of us that are trying to do that work as well as we possibly can, but this is definitely a priority area for us. So we talked about practice, we talked about education, we talked about advocacy, research, and now leadership, the other thing that we do in nursing that we all move in. Leadership, and this is my firefly slide because we are all fireflies. Every single one of us is a leader. It doesn't mean that we're in charge, that we're responsible for, some sort of unit or whatever, but leadership is really how we show up for the things that we care about. It is also how we care for ourselves. How do we take care of ourselves and our communities? How do we rest and rejuvenate when we need to? How do we build our own resilience? How do we work together to tackle these complex, wicked problems that we are, whatever they are, right? We all care about things that are deeply important and very different from each other, but that's the beauty of nursing and midwifery together, is that leadership is how we are coming together, how we are supporting each other, and how we are showing up for the work that we care about. It is not about overworking, but it is really about collective working. And we're not out there leading without light, right? There's a lot of really great ideas that have already been established in the world that we can start to head toward. I think the UN Sustainable Development Goals are one of those places. The goals give us ideas of what are all the things that we can do for health equity, for justice, for planetary health, for for the rights of nature and the flourishing of nature, and for the long-term benefit of generations to come. And so this is a great place to start, is just here with the SDGs. And there's a lot of other wisdom and ideas. Certainly the Planetary Health Alliance gives us a lot of illumination there. So we are our path of light. As nurses and midwives, we have an intuitive understanding that human health is intimately intertwined with the health of all of our ecological systems. Being a transformational healthcare professional, which we all are, is the practice of becoming the future that we want to see, leveraging our own positionality and our ingenuity and leadership now, and showing up for the work of this great transition that we are talking about, and the future of the healthcare systems and the sensibilities that will support the health and well-being of our patients and communities in our generations to come. So we are also our lights. And we have gone through practice and education and advocacy and research and leadership, and we are ending with stewardship. As nurses and midwives, we've come into our profession in a spirit of caring. we need to extend that care out into our own work that we're doing in healthcare. We have responsibilities for sustainable healthcare systems. I want to shine a light on the work that Practice Green Health has been doing. Practice Green Health has a lot of toolkits, ideas, webinars, articles, mentors on how to really address the waste that we are producing in our healthcare industries. So, so stewardship of our healthcare systems, stewardship of our immediate environments. These are also the roles that we play in nursing. I also included a slide on the Planetary Health Alliance, and I know you all know how to get there at this point. I will end with this final slide. I think it was, I actually think it was Dr. Odette Best, who is a nurse, researcher and scholar from Australia, and they said we're following our heart path, and I always love that. Like Barbie Dossey at the very beginning of this said, as nurses, we do our must. And so I loved this image that I got to snap on a trip to Cuba a couple of years ago, by Jose Fuster, who had created this beautiful garden with all these tiles, and then somebody had parked their bicycle right behind the heart. And so just reminding us that the work that we are doing in nursing and nursing for planetary health and well-being is really about following what we care about, and following our heart path. So I have put resources and references into a Google Doc for you all. It's got what I used for my slide. It's got a collection of articles that I think are key and important, and also links to resources that you can use. And I will pop that into the chat in a second. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi, for helping us understand how to apply the planetary health content that we started with in our own discipline and be agents of transformation. So much appreciated. This is our favorite moment in the talk, and that's when we get to hear from you. If there's specific questions that you have, you can either put them in the chat if you're not quite sure where the Q&A area is, or put them in the question and answer space, and we will address those. And they could be related to the content you've heard today, or things that you maybe are wondering about, or how we move forward together in our fields. So Heidi, I'm going to kick it off. A question for you, and that is that sometimes nurses feel that they don't have power, that they maybe aren't respected. And so if somebody is feeling out there of, I'm just a nurse, or I'm just learning this, or I'm just a follower of planetary health, what advice might you have to share with them?
Well, thanks, Teddie, for that. I think if there was one thing that I could say at the end of my lifetime that I was able to do, it would be getting the just out of in front of the word nurse, right? It drives me nuts that we say, I've said it too, I'm just a nurse, or I'm not a leader. So I think moving that just away helps to remind us that that is actually not true. There is no just in front of nursing or midwifery or any of the work that we're doing. You know, I think it goes back to that leadership slide, this idea of all of us are really showing up for what we care about. And that is incredible, because we move with our heart. And when we move with our heart, when we are attending to what needs to be attended to, when we are moving with the idea of caring and compassion, people know people know that when we talk from our heart, from our patterns that we've noticed, from the advocacy work that we want to see, from our heartbreaks that we've witnessed, people really listen to us. And so I think it's, I think the answer is remember that you are doing incredible work. Remember that your experience of listening to people's stories and witnessing the things that happen in people's lives is a gift. And when you speak from your heart, you are also speaking from the hearts and the needs of all of the people that you have been in service to. And I feel like that's the powerful thing. I think it's why we're the trusted, health profession.
Thank you. And one of the questions that came through, and I'm going to ask Hannah Antonucci if she gets this to put it in the chat. How many members are currently in the Planetary Health Alliance? And I'll answer the second part of this. And are other health occupations invited? Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. All health professionals, but quite frankly, all people. So it is all fields, all areas of knowledge. There's teachers, there's, as I said, farmers, there's lawyers, there's scientists, there's researchers, there's people who build roads, there's people who teach little children. It's just everyone working in this space for a better future. And nobody is better than another. It's not that the scientists are more important or the faculty or whatever are more important. It isn't. There isn't such a thing. So when we get together for the Planetary Health annual meetings, either live or virtual, oh my gosh, it's a great party and a great event because it's like you found your people, you found your family. People understand this and are working very hard to create the great transition that we've talked to. So even though this is a conference, this particular conference is billed as a conference for nurses and midwives. It is for this conference, this one right now, is for anybody who wishes to attend, quite frankly. But the Planetary Health Annual Meeting and Planetary Health Alliance is all of us. So no matter what skills or abilities you have, what backgrounds you have, even if you're not of a particular field, you are welcome to be part of the planetary health community. So I have a question for you, Heidi, and that is, it is your birthday, just in case we let you forget. It is your birthday today. So why did you say yes to this great adventure of showing up and spending a year planning this radically different conference and knew it was going to land on your birthday and you still said yes? Can you tell us a little bit about why you say yes?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that when we had the opportunity to work in collaboration, first of all, I love doing things like this on my birthday because I feel like it helps me guide my year, right? So I turned 59 today, but this is the first day of my 60th year on the planet, which feels really important to me. So it's I tend to talk about planetary health around my birthday because tomorrow is Earth Day, this is Earth Week. And so I think it's part and parcel for things that I've been doing. I've had something happen that's important on my birthday for the last 10 years that's been environment or nursing or work related. And it feels like it's the right way for me to guide my year. But more than just me and my little birthday, I think the opportunity to bring nurses together and midwives together from around the world in these really intimate conversation spaces is incredible. I just have to do a shout out to Deva-Marie Beck, who Deva found and helped to organize and bring together this list of almost 100 people that have come together to talk about just in nursing and midwifery what they are doing to move with planetary health. And so frankly, there's no way I could say no. No way.
And I want to share a story that it came to my mind. It was just I was thinking about it yesterday. Last year there was an amazing rainbow over our city. Just it was incredible. One of those that is just you can see every distinct color, and it's fairly rare. It's not blurry or faint. It was just such an obvious rainbow. So I called up my daughter who lives in the city, and I said, take the kids out on the back deck and see this rainbow. So she did, and my grandson, who was 4, said, "Oh, Grandma, I've never seen a real live rainbow." He had seen rainbows on pajamas and rainbows on toys and rainbows on stickers, etc. But he had never seen a real live rainbow. Now, here's the interesting thing. A child knows the rainbow is alive. A child knows the trees, the stones, the air, the water is alive. And somehow we educate that awareness out of them. So I want us all to grasp and hold on to it's alive. It is alive. And that's why I'm here today is to start us on this different path, a path that was once understood very well by indigenous peoples of recognizing the earth is vibrant and alive. That is a nursing message that I think will go a long, long way to restoring the health of people and the planet.
That is a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. And I love hearing this story. That's the first time today that you've brought in the story of your cute grandson. So that's terrific. One of the questions that came up in one of the earlier sessions that I'll pose back to you. Can you talk about how we move with grief and overwhelm and exhaustion, and what does that look like from this work that we are doing, and we're this idea of like, are we adding something on to our already busy lives?
So, loss of place and the loss of beings, the loss of biodiversity is a real, real loss, and the grief is real. So, if people are experiencing eco-anxiety, eco-despair, to me, it's not a sign of pathology, it's a sign of mental health. It's being aware and based in reality. These things are happening, but we don't want you to get stuck there. We want you to move, then feel the grief, because it's not like I want you to be discouraged and walk around disheartened. But if you allow yourself to sense the grief, something amazing happens. Because if you deny grief, deny grief, deny it, deny it, deny it, you're using so much energy to hold that down. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to realize it's real. All your energy goes to that. When you allow yourself to recognize we are losing beings at a very rapid rate, what will the earth look like for my little grandson who loves the live rainbow? When you allow yourself to feel that, all of a sudden that energy that was used to tamp down becomes available to you to use in our work to be part of the restorative process. So I don't find this space discouraging or disheartening. If anything, it is the antidote to nurses feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and frustrated right now. You're frustrated because it feels hopeless. You're sad and grieving because it's a broken system. You're right. So let's roll up our sleeves, get busy, and start to build a better system. Planetary Health is immensely hopeful, grounded in reality, based in science, fully aware of what's happening and the urgency of this moment, but extremely hopeful that we can figure this out. And Heidi, I tell you, I have been so moved today hearing nurses in Korea, Japan, the Maori nurses in New Zealand, hearing people all through Europe talk about what they're doing. Holy cow, I can't be in despair. I can't. I just almost have to think, wow, I've got to get going because look at all of the other things that are happening and that people are doing. So
Well,
it's a golden moment, isn't it?
it really is, and it's a good remembering that we have each other's backs. We're all doing this work collectively. So in any individual moment, when we need to rest and rejuvenate, it's okay, right? I don't have the entire weight of the world on my shoulders. We are all collectively sharing in this work that we're doing. And as that sharing happens, we can step back, we can step forward as we have the energy for this. I think the idea that we're bringing in, how do we use planetary health as a way of moving together, a movement building, as a way of thinking about what we're navigating and doing in nursing, this idea of imagining the systems that we need going forward versus scaffolding and holding up systems that are breaking or broken. That forward thinking, I think, is very collectively good for our for our well-being, so moving in our creativity, all of those things I think are great, and you bring that up so beautifully, so thank you for that.
You. And
I
now
know we're
we
at
close out
time.
this
Yeah,
section.
go ahead.
Right, we close out this section and head into our favorite part. And that is we take a little break here. You can look at the materials from the sponsors. So this, if you look at one of our tabs up on the lobby, you can see sponsors and sponsor informations. But we'll take a little half-hour break and be sure to come back because we're going to hear a wonderful presentation about what's happening in North America. What are the unique manifestations of our region? And then what are people doing about it? And this you won't want to miss. And if you find I'm looking at the various breakouts and I don't know which one to choose, they all look great. You're right, they're all great. But you get access to all of them after the conference. So choose one, be engaged, start the movement, find each other, and let's get going. Thank you very much.